Hey, everybody. Welcome to Idio Talk, a Radiohead podcast. Very glad to be back with you this week. I am one of your hosts, Walker Glenn.
I'm Zach Glenn.
How you doing, Zach?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited. We have another guest episode today. Interviewed a music theorist and professor, and I think that can be combined into one title of professor of music theory.
Yeah, he'd be an ethnomusicologist, I think is the technical title.
Oh, my God. I'm lost already. Brad Osborn is on the show today, and we pre-recorded that interview, which I thought went really well.
Yeah, went excellent. He's a very, very nice guy, very amicable.
Yeah, I'm very excited for somebody who has such expertise, like a literal Radiohead expert, to be able to talk to our listeners.
He has a card that, it's like the way Dr. Bill flashes his doctor badge. He has like a Radiohead expert badge.
Yeah, it's a lanyard.
Yeah,
and people know.
Who are you to be talking about? Well, let me show you.
Actually certified in expertise of Radiohead.
Yeah, totally.
But he's very humble about it, which I appreciate. But, we also just wanted to check in with our listeners and catch up with each other a little bit. How have you been doing?
Really, really good. Weather's finally cooled down. It's exciting. God, I love the cool weather. I love the 3 days of fall and winter that we get now.
I know the week-long break between fire seasons is so lovely in California.
No, it is really relaxing to me though, and using that time to listen to Radiohead a little bit. I have been mixing up the palette, but maybe another for another time we'll talk about that.
I mean, Zach, what better time and place to talk about what Radiohead you've been listening to than on Idio Talk, a Radiohead podcast?
No, I meant I've been mixing up the palette of artists.
Oh, sure. Well,
yeah.
I think that it's okay to drop some other names.
I've been really enjoying that new Mars Volta album. I think you said you gave it a try. You weren't too hot on it, huh?
I don't want to exaggerate. I listened to the first 3 or 4 songs, and when I was about that far in, without it kicking into kind of the full band sound, I just kind of was like, this is not really what I'm looking for, and I did end up finishing the rest of my workout to Deloused in the...
it's a great album, Comatorium.
Thank you, Jesus Christ. They don't make it easy, do they, the Mars Volta?
No.
In terms of
Francis the Mute is pretty
that rolls off the tongue a little bit, but the rest is either in made up English or Spanish.
Yeah, so. I really like that. I really like that. No, I get that. I mean, they're definitely specific, and I think that in the twilight of your 40s, it's hard to maybe, release something that has like a new flavor and is I wouldn't say it's their best work by any means, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. I would say I'd put it probably in the 3 spot of their whole catalog because I'm a huge Mars Volta fan. And I think for me, what's really, really cool is the story of the two, Omar Rodriguez Lopez and Cedric Bixler Zavalaza. Apologies, listeners. But it's really, really cool. Just they have that thing, I think, kind of a Tom and Johnny thing. Maybe a Johnny and Colin thing. I don't know. I don't really know that Radiohead is paired that much, but where it's such a beautiful bond. It's so partner like, but it is absent maybe that romantic element. Wouldn't be a problem if it was, but they're so locked in that way. But music is the glue.
Yeah.
And it's just really, and in addition to the Mars Volta, I've been listening to some solo stuff from one of the members of Radiohead too. So, connected a little bit. Yeah.
Are you comfortable saying, is it The Obvious or is it?
I've been listening to The Eraser.
I've been listening to The Eraser too.
Yeah. Really, really, really enjoy it and really feel like I've maybe my ears have opened up a little bit to like connecting sounds because I can hear a lot more Radiohead, I think forwards actually, interestingly enough, than I was able to before. Like I don't hear a ton of Kid A in it, but I hear a little bit of Hail the Thief in it, which makes sense. It was pretty close. We haven't talked about that album yet, and then definitely some King of Limbs, I would say as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's also maybe okay just to wet the beaks of our listeners and let them know that we are going to be doing an episode about The Eraser.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
And I'm really excited to talk about that. I'm glad you've been digging into it. I've been listening to music a ton lately.
Yeah, me too.
And Zach, I got to tell you what I listened to on the way up here.
Can't wait.
OK Computer.
Oh, no kidding.
and I it was like
I've been so cool on it since we talked about it.
It's so funny because I'm listeners, we're in Zach's home in Sacramento. We tend to bounce back and forth between recording at my place in Oakland and his in Sacramento. It's about a 90-minute drive with light traffic, and I was about halfway through that drive, and I was sipping on my oat latte, and I'm feeling good, and I just was like, you know what I'm in the mood for right now?
Arms inside the car.
Arms inside the car. Oh, yeah, they'll know that reference right now. Yeah, I saw one of those surfboard trucks that you see flying down the highway, and I was like, oh, let me just put my arms back inside here, because I had been, as Zach said, it's nice kind of warm autumn weather now. I was getting a tan on my left arm.
Subterranean and Homosexualian, both arms were just flailing out the window.
Exactly. I'm driving with my knees.
Like John Candy.
But yeah, I was like, man, I'm in the mood for some OKC right now.
Oh, nice.
And I was thinking, like, isn't it funny that I now have to listen to Radiohead and listen to Radiohead in a very analytical and critical way for this podcast. And yet right now, for pure pleasure,
I know,
I'm putting on OK Computer. And I was like, this is like a porn star getting home and making love to their husband right now off camera. Although I guess I am talking about it on the podcast, so I still,
oh my goodness,
I still did use it for content, and I really enjoyed it, Zach.
That's
still
great.
Love that album.
I will say, when I throw on OK, because I said I've been cool on it, I think that implies as if like I've cooled down. I just mean in terms of its rotation, I'd say it's maybe taken a little bit of a backseat since we released the podcast, because we recorded that way earlier this year. But kind of gearing up for release, I think I listened to OK Computer a lot. And like we've talked about, it's always, no other band besides maybe the Beatles is in regular rotation album-wise as much as Radiohead. But I have been listening forwards in the catalog, like one album back. So our last Radiohead album that we recorded was Amnesiac. So I've still been listening to that, and I've been listening to the album following that a lot. And then, like I mentioned, Tom York's. But yeah, that must have been fun, just going back.
It was fun. And I have been listening to something that is out of the studio album rotation as well, which is I've been listening to what is the first non-authorized vinyl release that I have ever purchased, a bootleg of Radiohead called Other Colors. And listeners can look this up if you want. It's a really cool cover, kind of like a almost watercolory, kind of abstract.
Let me take a look at it.
Flowing colors together, and it is BBC sessions that Radiohead have done, and so it's got some cool versions of. It has stuff from the Bends and stuff from Kid A. I don't know if there's any OK Computer stuff on the track. Oh no, there's also exit music for a film. So
talk show host would be the Bends though.
Yeah. And an acoustic version of Black Star, which I really like, and I have been enjoying that. And it's a Italian bootleg pressed on red vinyl. Surprisingly inexpensive and really enjoyable, but I was looking around for if there's more like unauthorized pressings of like B-sides and stuff, and it's hard to find something that isn't in a crazy price point. But yeah, so Radiohead remains in the rotation.
Well, and your vinyl collection of the band, as if you weren't a true fan enough, but is now complete upon complete.
Yes, well, I actually finally just got Kid Amnesiac too. Or I'm sorry, Kid Amnesia.
Yeah.
Kid Amnesia is what it's called.
I had to take a peek at my copy. And then you also got the live album, I Might Be Wrong.
As a present.
Yeah.
A birthday present from my co-host, Zach Glenn.
Yeah.
But
have you been jamming out to that?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. I love that album. And I love live albums, which is not something that I would have said as a younger person, but I really enjoy a good live album, hearing those songs, usually sped up a little bit, played with a little more energy, and the versions of those songs. I mean, we played some of it on our Amnesiac episode. Those are really, really great versions of the songs.
Yeah. But
and my favorite version of one song that we may hear in a future studio album.
Okay. Oh, wow. My interest is piqued. Future studio album. Okay. Oh, okay.
It could only be one.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I haven't added anything to the vinyl collection except for that Mars Volta album that we were previously talking about. Really, really cool looking. Is there any more Radiohead news to kind of cover off?
Well, Zach, I hate to tell you this, but it hasn't all been good Radiohead news for me lately.
Uh-oh.
I had a personal Radiohead low take place in my eyes. I had a personal Radiohead low take place in my
Ed Soul
life.
album.
That's right. No. No, Zach, recently I was at a barbecue.
Oh, okay.
I was at a barbecue at my friend Mikey's house. Now, Mikey is a really good friend of mine, very funny comedian in the Bay Area, has said that he has listened to the podcast.
Wow.
So he may be hearing this right now. And you know what? I hope he does.
Okay.
I was at a barbecue at my friend Mikey's house, and, I'm sure a lot of our listeners relate to this. I am still kind of getting my feet back under me socially, coming out of the pandemic. It's been a while at this point that we have reintegrated with each other and are hanging out, but group stuff for me is still it's taxing because it's both really exciting and feels new, but it's also produces a little bit of social anxiety in me in a way that it really didn't previously. All that to say, I know my friend Mikey and his girlfriend CJ very, very well for many years, but I was also mixing with friends of theirs that I was meeting for the first time or have just met a couple times at this barbecue. And so I was very excited and a little bit jumpy to be there in this situation. It was really fun. Get there, a few friends, meet a couple of Mikey's other friends that were new to me. Everybody's very friendly. The vibe is good. People are getting to know each other in a very comfortable way, and it's going great. And I'm sitting there just being like, this feels really good that this is going so smoothly.
I say that out loud usually when I'm feeling that at social gatherings.
Yeah.
It seems to ostracize me weirdly, though. I'll go, hey, this is going great.
Oh,
I would rate it at like an 8, and then people kind of just disperse usually. I don't know if you have tips for me or anything.
Oh, no, that's interesting because when I do that, people usually agree heartily. And it'll kick the party into its next level.
So things are going good.
Yeah. Things are going good.
This is a great story so far.
Thank you. Yeah. This is far.
I'm just happy.
So far, this is the story of a social event that went well.
In walks Tom.
York. No, of course. So we're sitting in Mikey's backyard. He's on the barbecue. People are, drinking beers, talking to each other, hanging out. I'm in a good conversation with somebody who I met for the first time, whose name unfortunately escapes me, but really nice lady, hitting it off, joking around. And Mikey's playing tunes, as you do at a kick it. And he's playing a mix of old school soul music.
Oh, okay.
Very good for a party, for a barbecue. And the song, I'm afraid I don't know the name of the artist, but the song, You Sexy Thing. I believe in miracles. Zach and me did not count that in, by the way, listeners.
No, we just made eye contact.
Yeah, hit it.
You sexy thing.
You sexy thing. So that song comes on, right? Who's complaining about that song? No one. And Mikey at the barbecue kind of turns to the group and goes, I think this is the new Radiohead song. Right? Pretty funny joke because the joke is...
I'm not laughing.
Yeah, that Zach actually looks pissed. So already things have gone awry for Zach. I think the joke there is, hey, this sounds nothing like Radiohead. No one would ever mistake this for Radiohead. I'm making a bit of a silly joke by saying, do you guys like this? I think it's the new Radiohead, right?
Okay.
And, I think I laugh along with the group, right? Because Zach, I love Radiohead. People close to me know I love Radiohead. It's not what I came into this barbecue talking about.
Sure. Yeah, of course not. And is this pre-pod or early on? I mean,
the pod is in full swing.
Okay.
This was very recently.
Okay.
And this was the social function where Mikey told me he had listened to a few episodes. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
That was a text exchange.
Yeah, because I did witness that one because you screenshotted it.
Mikey, your ears should be burning right now because me and Zach are. I have the receipts, Mikey, that you listen to the podcast.
He was wearing a body cam at the barbecue, so I was technically there too.
That's true. Yeah, Zach is always with me in case something like what happened happens and I need backup. I just lean into my lapel and I'm like, people are making fun of Radiohead at this barbecue. I'm going to need backup.
I'll be there in 2 hours.
Yeah. I have to be the last person to leave the barbecue because I'm waiting for Zach to show up from Sacramento.
So he makes a stupid joke.
Mikey makes it. Well, you say stupid.
I'm sorry.
I say silly, harmless, fun.
Sure.
Right?
Hilarious.
So Mikey makes this joke. People laugh. I laugh along with them. This doesn't sound like Radiohead. We're all having fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then my new friend, whose name I don't remember, says, yeah, sounds like that guy finally lightened up, referring to Tom York, singer of Radiohead, right? So now things are taking a turn for me because we've talked about the criticism of Radiohead that I really cannot abide is that their music is sad and that is
music
worthy
to slit your wrist to.
Right. It's like we're now kind of getting into those talk show hosts on meeting people as easy as, well, it's not music you'd play at a 1-year-old's birthday party, is it? Yeah. No, I wouldn't play most of the music I like at a function for babies. Right. So we're already getting into territory that I bristle at a little bit where it's like the thing worthy of derision about Radiohead is that there is emotion in their music. Right. Sounds like that guy finally lightened up. That gets a laugh. But this time it's a slightly smaller laugh because there's one person at the barbecue not laughing at that one. And can you guess who that person is, Zach?
I'm feeling like it's the person at my 12 o'clock.
Yeah, it's me. I'm not laughing.
Okay.
Right? And then Mikey says, yeah, hey, well, he was trying to tell us he was a creep and a weirdo. Now we're in an area where I'm like, okay, so you made a joke about Radiohead, but you don't really know Radiohead, do you? Because
your go-to is my
creep.
Mom could make that joke.
Zach, you understand me in a way that nobody at this party ever could. These people that I thought were my friends.
Stacey Care.
Right? And at that point, everyone laughs and I stay silent. And this is now where this goes from being a story about people saying something that is personally offensive to me to my own personal cowardice. Because at this point, Radiohead has been made fun of 3 times, and I have said nothing each of the 3 times. And I think there's a very obvious allegory here, which is the disciple Peter denying our Lord Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed. By the time that third joke rolled around, I practically heard a cock crowing in East Oakland where this party was because I said, did I say, hey, I actually, what I should have said is, hey, actually, this is not funny to me. I have a Radiohead podcast. Radiohead is my favorite band, and I'm having a good time at this party, and I like you, and some of you are old friends of mine, and some of you are new friends of mine, but this shit is not okay. But I didn't say any of that. Right. I simply shrunk into myself, cried a single tear into the LaCroix that I was sipping, and
prepared your cross because Peter famously crucified himself. Well, he didn't crucify himself. But he...
you don't hear about a lot of suicides by crucifixion.
I don't even know.
He requested
Yes,
to be
thank you.
crucified upside down.
It was a weird kink he had.
Yeah, because he was not worthy to be killed the same way as the Lord.
Right. No, Walker didn't carry the allegory all the way through.
Yes, and when I die, I will request to die in an opposite way of Zach, who I know has never been quiet about his Radiohead fandom. I shrunk into myself. I said nothing. And if Mikey is listening to this is the first he even knows that I'm upset about him. My cowardice continues. I'm confronting this in now I have the bully pulpit. Now I have a platform. But I could have said something then. I could have said, they transcended Creep less than 2 years later. Hey, they have songs that convey a whole rainbow of emotions, not just sadness.
Nice touch with Rainbow too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I said none of this, and I come to you humbled and ashamed. This is horrifying to have to expose myself to our listeners this way and to you this way, but
it's brave though. I
What
really appreciate it.
What do you think?
I think that it's a different world we're living in, right? So the comparison to betraying of Christ is very apt. But culturally, I think that, like you were saying, it is 2022. The pandemic, I believe, in the stateside here, we kind of all became aware of it early 2020. So good long while, a big gap there for a lot of folks. I totally relate to what you're saying, basically, of, you have that excitement, socially or whatnot, but you're still got to knock some rust off the gears a little bit,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been a journey for me to learn the very obvious lesson that the things that I love, it's great to be excited about them. It's great to want to share them with people in a setting such as this, but you do have to be able to let some things go. Now, I don't diminish any of what you're saying about the need to feel shame and embarrassment that you didn't stand up and, say the thing that you just shouted at
That's
me.
the only way we learn and grow.
Yeah. But I also, there's that push-pull too of like, do I humiliate myself? Or do I then get the last laugh? Because as you know, Walker, I'm all about the long con. I have cons right now that are years in the making.
Oh, okay.
That won't come to fruition.
Am I the victim of any of them?
No, I think that you've caught on to my shenanigans by now because they're all social cons. They're not like
I see.
They're not Lufthansa heights or anything. But I think though that ultimately most of these folks in attendance will be fans of the pod, as we know Mikey is. Number one fan, if I'm not mistaken. He started the Idiot Talk fan club. I'm just kidding. But
he'll end it when he hears this episode.
No, I do think though that there is the phrase "silence is violence." I think in that case, silence said probably a lot more. That someone had to have seen you. Picture Sopranos when Tony is remembering back to the card game and Carmela has told him, "Hey, these guys don't actually think you're funny. They laugh at your dumb jokes because you're the boss." And his memory replays, and he sees that I forget the actor's name, but he's not laughing along. I think that a lot of people are recalling back to that moment as they're listening to this podcast. And remembering you, head shaking, eyes glared.
No, but I
laughing.
didn't. But see, you're giving me too much credit. No.
Okay.
No. I'm proud to at least say that much. I laughed cautiously at Mikey's first joke. Because in that, I don't feel like Radiohead was yet the victimization of the brutal bullying that took place at this barbecue.
And also Mikey, very, 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 very funny, talented comedian. Not a great joke there, I wouldn't say. Not a lot of creativity.
We have notes on this one.
Anyways.
Don't put that in the act. I laughed along to that one. And also I laughed along to that one too, because I'm like, Mikey likes Radiohead. So I'm like, hey, that's like a Radiohead fan to Radiohead fan. We can make a joke that this 1960s soul song doesn't sound like Radiohead. No one's getting hurt. Now, the fact that what this actually was the beginning of a vicious smear campaign against a band that he knows I love and that he supposedly also is a fan of does make me question whether he has heard anything other than Pablo Honey. and whether he actually does like the band, or if he, my friend of many years, of almost a decade, I don't know this person at all. And they are actually a duplicitous mastermind playing all the angles. And before he hangs out with me, he does some internet searches and like looks up some stuff about Radiohead and is like, hey, by the way, like I really like Radiohead, that band that you have a podcast about that we're both fans of. And I just swallow it hook, line, and sinker because I'm desperate to be loved and to have friends. But then it's like, oh, I'll get some of my other friends here, my friends who I make fun of Radiohead with.
Right.
You know, that's what I'm thinking now.
Imagine the planning that would go.
I don't have to imagine it. I saw it unfold.
Firsthand.
But yeah, so I did laugh at that joke, and then I did not laugh at the other jokes. But I also think you are giving me too much credit when you if you had been there, you would have been like, Walker's hurting right now. Walker doesn't think this joke's funny, right? But I don't think that I properly signaled that I was opposed to what was happening to the group. And I think if silence is going to speak volumes in this situation and not be violence, I think that what I should have done, if I didn't say this is wrong and I won't stand for it, I should have quietly gotten out of my seat, turned to the group and said, thank you for a lovely afternoon. I need to be going now.
Yes.
And walked out. And then maybe that leaves enough of a, wow, Walker really wasn't okay with what just happened. And he didn't stand for it, and he removed himself from the situation before he said something ugly to all of us that he would probably regret.
I think, I mean, I think that I think a lot of times we forget when we've had, life lessons, that we've learned from where maybe we didn't stand up for our neighbor, or, we saw something and we, wish we would have behaved differently. It's really hard to talk about those things with friends, with, therapists, God forbid. But with,
yeah, if you're weak.
no, but the fact that you're kind of telling, me about this, we had talked about it off pod, but, and the audience is really, really brave. And, I know that feeling. I mean, I've not with Radiohead, of course, but there's just a couple things I can think back in life. Maybe saw someone being pushed around a little bit. Or certainly wasn't participating, but wish maybe I could have come in and behaved differently. And I think it's really brave of you, basically, to talk about this on mic. And so if you're looking for forgiveness, I definitely want to help you there.
I really appreciate that, and really all I ask is that you and our listeners hold me accountable in the future. But I would like to say that there's been a lot of personal reflection from this incident, and when we forget our past mistakes, we can't grow and learn.
That's what I was kind of trying to say, I think.
No, I appreciate it. And I hope that I can say with confidence that this will be the last time that Radiohead is bashed in my presence without me standing up for what I believe in and living my principles. Because it's all well and good to present myself as a unabashed Radiohead fan in the presence of like-minded company. It's another thing to live those principles when they're challenged.
Yeah.
So,
no, totally.
all I can do is try to do better in the future.
Yeah.
And stop being friends with Mikey, probably.
Well, and, we were talking about Jesus earlier, and, he also has a quote about how many times you should forgive your brother. And Mikey is Walker's friend, as he pointed out, but he is a very hilarious comedian. So, I hope to interact with Mikey in the future, whether, through you or however, and just, rake hot coals upon his head by being super friendly and congenial to him.
Kill him with kindness.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what, though? That does, since we have, since I have invoked his name so many times.
Can we give him a plug?
Mikey Walls, extremely funny comedian. Check him out. Good friend of mine. Every friendship has its bumps, and I guess taking a cue from the quote of our Lord and Savior that Zach just dropped, I want to let you know, Mikey, I forgive you for what happened to me at your barbecue.
Also a talented musician too. I think I've seen his act where he plays a ukulele.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just a really great creative
No,
guy.
Mikey's great. So you can
Yeah.
imagine it was doubly shocking to be, treated this way.
Yeah, totally. Well, I
like how I've slowly morphed this into that this was directed at me.
So I have a sweet Radiohead story. It's a little shorter, but I was wondering if I could tell you about it.
Yeah, please.
So our grandma was over on Sunday with my uncle who lives out of the country. So it was really, really great time just visiting. And our uncle is he's a worldly guy, literally. He's lived all over, very, very cool person. And it was really cool to, he asked about the podcast, which was, very, very nice. And, it was cool because he used to do lighting for like rock concerts. So he, Pink Floyd, when they were without Roger Waters, Aerosmith, like lots of big acts, right? And I don't know that he ever worked on any Radiohead shows. He might have, but he's very aware of their kind of cultural impact and endurance, which, not that people don't know about this outside of the show, but it was cool because he talked about OK Computer, and he was kind of telling our grandma about it a little bit. He and I had a nice like back and forth going. Like I think I took OK Computer. He took OK Computer. I took Kid A, and he took In Rainbows, and it was really, really cool to I don't know the degree of his fanship, but it was really, really cool to just hear someone basically not you or I talk about it, and very, very similar type of narrative. But it was cool too because as he was talking about In Rainbows to our grandma and how kind of said fuck you to the record industry, Radiohead did rather, I kind of added on the point that it was really cool too because it was like an actions speak louder than words thing, not necessarily politically, but Radiohead are a political band as we've talked about, but certainly from a business perspective, right? There's so much risk in what they did. And Grandma Penny, listening along. And Fiona Apple came up in conversation, and our Uncle Darren emailed, I hope it's okay to say his name on mic, emailed me yesterday and wants to connect us with the future guest. Walker and I will talk about that after. And he also put in the sweetest note that made me the smile so big that he said, your 82-year-old grandma went home and has been listening to Radiohead and Fiona Apple.
Ugh.
I know.
She's so cool.
Not our podcast.
She's like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, she is so cool. And I mean, it's such a cool thing because, at no point was I like, hey, give me your phone, Grandma Penny. Let me, she's going to do what she's going to do. And that is, the mark of the type of person when I'm, nearing that age. Certainly a lot of people get ensconced in dogmatic thoughts and even your taste doesn't have to be all bad in your 50s. I could totally see that happening to me.
Sure.
But to take seriously what your 30-something-year-old grandson and there's such a gap there, but I never feel that, and I think it's so cool that's kind of I think how you should evolve in those years, and it's very, very rare, and not and then there's also just the fact that those are two artists that I adore.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've ever mentioned Fiona Apple on mic, but I know Walker and I are huge fans of hers, so I thought that was really neat and just wanted to share.
That is so heartwarming.
I know.
And yeah, I mean, our grandma is, I think, just a really exemplary person in terms of open-mindedness.
Absolutely.
But also confident and knows who she is and knows what she's about, but like keeps taking things in. And I agree with you. I think that I already see the way that I am getting set in my ways in terms of what I let in. And I do seek out new music, but I always kind of go back to, but the stuff I got into when I was 20 is the best music, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely would like to aspire to be checking out stuff that my grandkids, if I ever have any, turned me on to.
Yeah.
But Zach, I'm sorry. This is also making me feel so much worse.
Why?
Because your story is about how I without even using it as an opportunity to self-promote the podcast, am out there shaping hearts and minds towards Radiohead, guiding people towards Radiohead, taking the initiative to do it. And my story is about Radiohead coming up in conversation and me going mute when I had an opportunity. It's just we already covered it. I'm gonna move on, and I'm gonna do better from here. But it's just I am disgusted with myself. I think that now too. I realize that in my telling of this story, why I had to frame Mikey so much as the villain, because who am I really mad at? It's me. It's me for not doing what I know I should have done.
It's like Melfi says, depression is rage turned inward.
Yes.
You know, you were turning it outward at Mikey. But actually, that's a quote from The Sopranos that has stuck with me so much. Don't be so hard on yourself. There will be opportunities to defend Radiohead in the future.
I hope so.
I will manufacture one if one does not come up.
Maybe I should be like, maybe I should talk to Mikey before this episode comes out, so he doesn't know what I'm up to, and be like, "Hey, can we do another barbecue where we invite and I get him to invite that exact guest list, and then try to recreate the conditions?" And I'm like, "Hey, let's listen to I Believe in Miracles or You Sexy Thing, whatever it's fucking called."
Right.
And then if Mikey doesn't make the joke, maybe I could make the joke.
You put on a wig that day.
Yeah, exactly. I make the joke about, I think this is the new Radiohead. People laugh. And then somebody says something derisive about Radiohead. And that's when it's like, hey, I got your ass.
Right.
Like, this isn't just another barbecue because the first one was so fun. Because one person wasn't having fun at that last barbecue, and that was me.
No,
and it's
everyone's not going to be having fun.
Because I want you to feel how So depression is rage turned inward. Well, I turned it outward at Mikey. Then I turned it back inward on myself. Now I'm turning it back out on all of you. Because
it's a very efficient cycle.
Yeah. This is like, I have forced you to relive the trauma that I went through at this barbecue.
If more people did this, I think we would just have a more healed, peaceful country.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but I think the conditions are so hard to remanufacture. But no, I really do believe, whether it's, in that example you just gave, a lot of logistical planning in that. But, as we talked about, fall and winter are very short. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for barbecues.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I just think you bring it to the table to the audience. It's very brave. Speaking of the audience, I really do want to thank folks who have tuned in, following us on various social media platforms, listening to the show. It makes a huge, huge difference. I know it's a lot for the amount of time that we ask per episode. We're doing our best, and I really did just want to say a sincere thank you to the folks who have listened.
We're having so much fun doing this, knowing that there are folks out there enjoying it. Really, really helps, and it's just been a blast to engage with people about what they're kind of learning about Radiohead through us. That sounds very lofty to say, but I have had those conversations, and it feels great. And thank you so much for listening, listeners. And Zach, it's been really great catching up with you. Do you think we should cut to our interview with Brad Osborn?
I think we should.
All right, listeners. Well, without further ado, enjoy our interview with Brad Osborn. He's a great guy, real pleasure to have, and just so knowledgeable about the band. And here we go. Hey folks, welcome back to Idio Talk. We are very, very excited about the guest we have today. We have Brad Osborn with us, who is the Associate Professor of Music Theory and affiliated faculty in American Studies at the University of Kansas. And importantly for this show, he is the author of the book, Everything in Its Right Place, Analyzing Radiohead. Brad, welcome to Idio Talk.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Appreciate you being here.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, I think you talked about this in a previous interview from quite a few years ago, just some of the classes that you teach at University of Kansas. I recall one class you'd mentioned at the time that was geared around teaching music theory. Could you talk a little bit about what you teach?
Yeah, so for 10 years now, I've been teaching the freshman music theory, 8 a.m., 5 days a week. So this is like the required course that all freshman music majors have to take. And I've done a lot of work refocusing that class instead of like, people have this negative impression of music theory, like it's all about learning these rules. But I've really refocused the class, A, to be mostly entirely about popular music rather than classical music, and B, to be more about music creation and listening to music and transcribing music. And I really don't even bother teaching them any rules at all. In fact, I make it a point not to use the word rule whatsoever in my teaching.
Yeah, because I don't know, how many of your students maybe... Walker, my mic's on, right? It's picking this up?
You're good to go.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know how many of your students frame it this way, because for me, music theory was definitely sort of a later in life discovery, and then being a guitar player, it's like, guitar theory is maybe not like the best instrument to start on, just for me personally, but it can be this amazing thing that can open up your world, but it can also maybe put some constraints on it as well. Again, I don't know if that's experience, but just for me a little bit.
Well, and that's the same with like music education in general. Like I talk to so many people who are like, oh, I was going to be a music major, but like my high school choir director said he didn't like my voice, and so I quit music. Like you have to be really careful when you teach music, because it is a creative, personal endeavor that you want to nurture instead of gatekeep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And going off of that, and before we get into some of the concepts that you discussed in your book, I was wondering if we could go back just a little bit further and ask about your initial discovery of Radiohead. And it's kind of a two-part question. So,
yeah.
Were Radiohead a band that you'd enjoyed and, listened to in depth prior to like undergraduate or graduate level of study of music? And, if they were, was there a part of you that, had hoped that you could one day write about them in like an academic sense? And if not, I was curious at what point, if things were this linearly, at what stage in your education did you realize like, your study of music would intersect possibly with Radiohead?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the 90s, I subscribed to BMG Music Club, like many people, where they would just like send you a CD in the mail and you either got to keep it or send it back.
Yeah.
And they sent me the Bends, and I sent it back. I was not a huge fan of the Bends, and I just really wrote it off as kind of like this boring rock music. I was listening to a lot of hip hop at the time, and it was college, so Kid A had just come out when my college roommate was like, "Hey, you need to listen to this band, like Radiohead." And I was like, "Oh, they're just like one of those boring rock bands. I'm into punk rock now." And he's like, "I don't really think you could call this rock music." And I was like, "Fine, I'll listen to it." And yeah, I was completely blown away by how it was like a completely different band than I had heard just 5 years ago.
Right.
And very quickly became like a Radiohead convert and started proselytizing like all Radiohead fans do. But still like really was not a fan of those early two records. It kind of begrudgingly started to like OK Computer, but didn't find it as cool and experimental and blippity bloopity as Kid A. And it was when I was in grad school, I used to listen to music to go to sleep at night, which now I definitely can't do because I think about music too much. And it was lying there, and it was probably 1, 2 in the morning, and Idiotech came on, quite fitting for this podcast. And I heard this weird rhythmic thing that would become what I talk about for basically 10 pages at the end of the rhythm chapter in the book, how there's like, whoa, he's like singing in one time signature, but like the drums are in another. And that just like came to me as I was laying there at 1 in the morning. And that became my master's thesis in grad school. It was basically writing about that. And it's like when you first have your very first idea as an academic, it is like that bolt of lightning comes down and strikes you with this like divine intervention. And you're so scared that you'll never have a good idea ever again. So, I mean, that was like my first like paper I ever wrote about Radiohead, which at the time in 2003 was like not a thing that in academia was okay to write about. I was in a grad school program for theory and composition. I was pretty much expected to write about like the Second Viennese School and 12-tone music, but maybe like mid-century American minimalism, definitely not pop music. And I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time where the field was starting to change. And I'm proud to have been kind of a catalyst for that change to make the study of pop music like a serious endeavor.
Man, that is so cool. Yeah, and it's cool to talk to somebody that, like you said, is instrumental in that. I don't know, I don't know how much the tide has turned. You're in academia, but I don't know if folks are writing about, Lizzo or some, maybe, I don't know, Walker, help me out. Some hip hop artist that, is really, there's a ton.
For you're asking me to think of a modern hip hop artist, and the first thing that came to mind was Snoop Dogg, the most old man reference I could have possibly. I don't know, Run DMC, right? They're pretty white hot right now, I think.
No, I just know that there's a lot of folks though that in different genres of music that they might be contained to a certain genre, but they do a lot of interesting stuff like Radiohead, and it's just really cool to hear, that's something that's more accepted rather than music that was made and written, 300 to 400 years ago.
Yeah.
It's really, really awesome.
I'm one of the editors at Music Theory Online. Shout out to the most read music theory journal in the world. And we did like a whole special issue on the analysis of Kendrick Lamar. So speaking of someone who is pushing,
that's who I was trying to think of.
Yeah, pushing boundary limits, doing interesting stuff. But the field has evolved now to where it's really like you can find an interesting way to talk about any pop music. And in fact, it's not just accepted. It's basically like the best way to get a book published in academia and music theory right now is to be writing about popular music.
Wonderful. So talking about your book, Everything in Its Right Place, Analyzing Radiohead, we will put it in the notes for listeners to go on and purchase. But like I mentioned, it was so enlightening and helpful to me personally in several ways. I think it may have been before we started recording, but it really helped kind of just give me a little bit of an arsenal of when trying to play Radiohead for folks, if they reject certain things or are confused by it, but have a little bit of interest to kind of explain some of that. But that's what your whole book really is, how I would encapsulate it, is an explanation of the band in so many different ways and angles. And one of the things that you discuss in detail is Radiohead's different approaches and use of song forms. So I was hoping that you could take us through those, and starting with just kind of basic brass tacks of the verse chorus strophic form.
Yeah,
and what that is.
So to understand how Radiohead is like so experimental in the ways of form, you have to really understand what is expected in terms of rock music and really popular music generally. So I don't mean to only speak of rock music here, but most popular music relies on one of two forms, and this has been true since the 1960s. Verse chorus form. I think people have heard these words, verse chorus, but the form is basically, you alternate a verse which has various lyrics with a chorus which has kind of the same hook every time. And that's been around pop music since the 60s. Actually, strophic form is much older than that. It just doesn't have choruses. So we're talking now like back to the 19th century, where you have some sort of backing music, and each time it comes around, you put different lyrics over the top of it. And you maybe have a catchy phrase you put kind of at the beginning or at the end of each one. So like, I'm just going to choose Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun, right? So it's a strophic form. There's not really a chorus to that song. It's just a bunch of different lyrics over the same music. But at the end of each of the strophes, she says the title.
Okay. So like Bob Dylan's Desolation Row, would that be
and like
a million of his other songs?
Right. Most of Bob Dylan's songs are strophic form. But also you can think of the Prince song Kiss. How it's like a long, like 12-bar blues, like strophe form. And at the end, he simply says the word kiss.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Yeah.
So starting out then, we would say that Radiohead, at least on Pablo Honey and probably most of the Bends, would you say it's fair to say that they sort of follow this form, conventional form, if you will?
Every single song off of Pablo Honey and the Bends follows one of those two conventional forms.
Okay, got it. As the book progresses, you talk about different forms, and I'm sorry if I have it out of order here, but I know that something you talk about is the Goldilocks zone. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And this is not just pertaining to form, but this is kind of my whole overarching theory with Radiohead that while they do some experimentation with certain things, be it form, harmony, rhythm, or timbre, they never just like go completely overboard and bombard you with something that you have no frame of reference for. So it's not too conventional. It's not too experimental. It's like the child Goldilocks, right? It's like, it's just experimental enough to sell 29 million records while also keeping folks like us scratching our beards about it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's just so well said. I mean, it's like a Paranoid Android. I mean, we could name, any number of tracks, even starting with Airbag, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe a little bit, in our episode, we talked about Where's the Chorus, and, it's there, but just that whole bombastic close. So, I mean, yeah, listeners, you can think of any number of examples, but then you talk about, one of my favorite parts of the book is when you talk about terminally climactic forms.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. This is something I came up with when I was working on a dissertation. I did a whole dissertation on experimental song forms in rock music. And Radiohead plays a large part in that. But actually, the first time I heard this was in the music of Coheed and Cambria, who've kind of famously set their first few records to these comic books that were inked by the lead singer, written and inked by the lead singer. And what I noticed he was doing is those climactic moments in the comic book, he was setting those not as recurring choruses in the song, but as these like single climactic moments at the ends of songs. And it kind of makes sense if you're telling a linear plot that you don't want to come to the climax of the linear plot like 2 or 3 times as a chorus would do. You save it for once at the end. And this is something Coheed and Cambria does a lot. It's something that Radiohead does a lot. And then it's something that like other artists do maybe once or twice. Maybe, right? So it's a bad strategy for selling music on the radio, to be totally honest with you, because the whole point of a chorus is like if someone's flipping through the dial, or in our modern age, clicking through the streaming the forward button. Your best chance of getting noticed is to start with the chorus, which is why all songs since 2014, since the birth of streaming services, all songs start with their chorus, because they really want to make sure you hear that part. And so saving like your main hook for like the end of the song and only doing it once is a really terrible strategy. So it's something that you can kind of only do once you've got a dedicated fan base who will listen to your music. Radiohead actually takes that leap pretty early on in their career. The first single I can think of in terms of climactic form is Karma Police, where at the end we finally get that whole "for a minute there, I lost myself." And that's like such a great sing-along moment, but it's only once at the end.
Walker's favorite moment of tape rolling up in any song, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite use of feedback in any song with that tape echo. Yeah.
Now, so I have a question then. So can you explain to me and to the audience why Street Spirit wouldn't count in that? Because wouldn't Immerse Your Soul in Love? How is that different from the coda of Karma Police, if you could call it a coda? Because it is a little bit different, but it still follows the same picking pattern and rhythm, right?
Yeah, so I'm pretty like choosy in what I count as being like actually different. So a terminally climactic form has to end not only in memorable material, but new material.
Okay.
And so a lot of artists will maybe kind of alter some little bit of the final chorus, or they'll put in an outro that's derivative of something else. So to me, that's a different thing than really having a different chord progression, a different melody, different lyrics.
Got it. Okay. Well, then I'm pretty certain that this does fall into that category. Can we talk about the song There? Now, I do remember in the book it was labeled with statistical and syntactic climax.
Yeah. So
but does this fall under that?
Yeah. So this is definitely a terminally climactic form, the end of There. And I just talk about like kind of 2 different ways to measure that. So what I've talked about for the last couple minutes is what I would call a syntactical approach to the analysis of form, which is that like, what are all the things we expect syntactically to happen in a chorus? We expect memorable lyrics. We expect a new kind of progression. So when those things that we expect of a chorus happen only once at the end, that's a terminally climactic form because it's like behaving chorus-like. But a different way to measure climax happens in There, Sit Down, Stand Up. I always get the order of those wrong. Stand up, sit down, stand, sit. You'll correct me on that one. But what happens in those is kind of a different kind of climax where it's actually we've reached the loudest volume level. And so if you look at the song on a waveform, you have like statistical evidence that the ending is like louder. or like a thicker texture than anything that came before it. So that's kind of a different way of measuring climax. And sometimes they happen together. I actually think There is a great example where the ending is both the loudest thing and also the most memorable thing.
It is, yeah. And I mean, I love that there's, there's more than one page, I think, dedicated in your book to it. And I know a lot of folks love that song, right? But it's just, it's a climax, and it was so funny when you're talking. I believe the lead singer of Coheed and Cambria is Claudio Sanchez, I believe. But
correct,
how you're talking about how it's like, maybe it was the comics that sort of punctuated what you were noticing in their music. And with Radiohead, obviously, there's a very strong visual accompaniment with the artwork of Stanley Donwood and Tom York. But it's not. They don't seem to be super connected, which is a thing I love. But in the song, they're there, and many others, the way it twists from the first 2 minutes and 55 seconds to this bright song, maybe a little bit more upbeat in lyrics, certainly not. And then when it makes that pivot to the outro of the song that you were just talking about, I do get really, I don't know. I get a lot of imagery, and it could be the words and stuff like that. But yeah, I just think those things are working so well to each other. Hand in glove, and even how it goes from, like I was saying, kind of bright major chord progression in the verse chorus to a very odd sounding chord progression, but with those beautiful harmonies. It's just, I mean, obviously I could go on and on and on, but it's just so incredible.
No, you're right. And it's funny you mentioned the minor chord progression at the end, because let's see, like B minor, D minor, A minor, E minor. They're all 4 minor chords. Now, the B minor and the E minor are fine; those are in the key signature. But in fact, you have to alter the D and the A chord to make them minor. They're both like chromatically altered minor chords, so like as dark as you can get, basically.
Yeah, it's like a D minor. Is there 6th? I'm not sure, but it's very trippy.
Would the end of All I Need be another example?
A great example, yeah, and especially a great example of like a statistical climax at the end of that one. It's so loud at the end of that song, and it's so quiet before then. And I mean, this is also funny in this day and age when we're just like compressing the hell out of every audio file, that we can have a song like that is like really a lot louder at the end than it is. And a lot of the end of All I Need is like, they start playing on different instruments, like Phil Selway is all of a sudden just riding on a crash cymbal, something he almost never does, because he's a classy drummer. He almost never does that. And then you've got Johnny Greenwood playing literally all 12 chromatic pitches on his viola at once. So there's so much thickness in that texture that makes it so loud. That's a great example.
Okay.
So another song form that you talk about that I was so excited to talk about is Through Composed Form. And the 2 songs that I recall you talking about are I Will and 2 + 2 = 5. And I would love you to talk about I Will first, because I feel like I understand through composition, but maybe not how it pertains to that song. So would you take us through that, please?
Sure. So through composition just means that once you leave a section, you don't come back to it. So it's the antithesis of verse-chorus form, because verse-chorus form, you come back. After you leave the chorus, you go to a verse, but then you come back to the chorus. So in through composed forms, you just keep going. If we assigned letters to section names, it wouldn't be A, B, A, B. It would be A, B, C, D, E, and so forth. Now, where people usually get confused on the definition of this is they think that you can't repeat anything. But of course, you can repeat something as many times as you want. Just when you leave it, you don't come back to it. And
got it.
And so I Will is really just an A, B form. We have that kind of initial verse sounding thing. But then when we get to the little baby's eyes at the end, that's a B section with a new chord progression and a new melody. And we never go back to the original stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
I thought, I was thinking I Will would be an ABC, but yeah, I guess it would just be, you're saying it would be AB only, right?
Yeah, because you've just got that original 3-chord progression, C sharp minor, A major 7, G sharp, sus 4. That's the whole of the A section, is just those 3 chords, which is, of course, spoiler alert, like spinning plates backwards. Yeah, but...
So what about 2 + 2 = 5? I think this one might be a little bit...
Yeah, that's more complicated. Right? That one actually has 4 sections. So the the pensive 7/8 clicky clicky A section, and then you go to the free time. It's the devil's way, where it's like all amorphous, and then you've got the C section is like the 90s Pearl Jam rock out.
Yeah.
And then the D section continues the rock out, but it's got a new drum groove and a new chord progression. And I trust so da 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 da. And then we're done. They never come back to any of those things. And I love that that's the opening track on Hail to the Thief, because it just sets up so like, all right, y'all wanted the rock back. We gave you the rock back, but we're not going to like do a boring verse chorus form with it. So this is what you get.
Yeah.
And then they're like, now sit down, stand up. Psych.
Right.
The rock is not back.
The rock is not back. Fooled you.
But you did have it correct. It is sit down, stand up. So you nailed it there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And also too, Phil and Ed sequenced Hail to the Thief. So we can say thank you to them for putting that song first.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Our Hail to the Thief episode is coming out. So I've been doing as much research as I can on that one. But one of the higher level concepts you explore in your book is the maximally even and or Euclidean rhythms. And I was hoping that you could explain that to us and to the audience, and then, maybe a couple song examples, if you would.
Sure. This is something I really need like a chalkboard for, but I'm going to do my best. All right. So as we all know, a lot of music is based on like 4/4 time, where you have like 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda. And a lot of times, like if you're instead of disco beat, we're just going to accent 4 of those. So 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda. But a different way to parse out those 16 notes is like, what if we did a number that doesn't divide well? So like 5. And I like the analogy to pie here. Okay, so what if I bring a pie to a party and it's already been cut in 16 pieces, but there are 5 people? How do I most fairly or maximally evenly distribute those 16 pieces of pie to 5 people? The answer is that most people get 3 pieces, and one lucky person gets 4 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And that rhythm, if I can clap it, that rhythm forms like a class of rhythms I talk about in the book called maximally even rhythms. And to take it all back to the Goldilocks zone, it's a funkier rhythm to be sure, but it follows like a kind of a predictable mathematical pattern. This concept of maximal evenness that's been shown to exist in a number of the most popular rhythms from a great many diverse cultures all over the world. It just so happens that they kind of maximize funkiness without being too complicated.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about 2 + 2 = 5 just a minute ago. Now, does that fall into that category because of the 7/8?
It sure does. So how many 8th notes in 7/8? 7 of them. How many kind of beats in that groove? 3. Dum dum da da dum dum da da dum dum da da dum dum da da. So 2 of those beats have 2 8th notes, and one of them has 3. 2 + 2 + 3. It would be nice if it was 2 + 2 5, right? Of course, but it's not. So that will be the maximally even distribution of 3 beats in 7 counts.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading your book, and I'm just so obsessed with that song, and it was 7/8, and then you explained like you just did, and I was just sitting there counting it, and I went, "Oh, I got it!"
Nice.
It was an aha moment. It was so funny. Now, what about another numerically focused song, 15 Step? Does that fall into the category of what you just described?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways to clap that rhythm, and of course, there's a clapping rhythm in the background itself. But the way that most people feel 15 Step is kind of like Dave Brubeck's song "Take 5." Da 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 da. Also in the Mission Impossible groove. Da, 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 da. So 15 Step would be doom ba bum ba dum boom ba bum ba dum bum 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 bum. And all of those rhythms I just clapped have the same property. They're the maximally even distribution of 4 beats over 10 counts. Mm-hmm. So 2 3-count beats and 2 2-count beats. 3 + 3 + 2 + 2 is 10.
Yeah, but so cool. And this kind of goes to the Goldilocks zone, even though initially we were talking about like maybe some of the challenges, maybe just that I've experienced of turning folks on to them is that like 15 Step I know was used in the soundtrack to Twilight. Maybe not the best film, but certainly very mainstream, right? And it is one of those songs, Morning Bell, I think about too. You know, we'll put 2 + 2 = 5 on the outside for just a minute. Very kind of, you know, you can tap your foot, and I feel are very palatable, right? And it's just so amazing that they're able to not hypnotize, but bring you into that Goldilocks zone, right? To where, you know, you can just kind of sit back and enjoy it without, you know, breaking your mind to try and understand what's going on. But talking about a song that breaks your mind, so you dedicate the entire last chapter of your book to Pyramid Song, from Radiohead's 2001 album Amnesiac. And you explore the complexity of the song in really finite detail from like every possible angle imaginable, it seems. So if you could just explain to our listeners maybe the more rhythmic aspects of the song, starting in the mod 16 palindrome, unless that's a weird place to jump in.
No, it's great. I mean,
a little bit.
Over the years, if I were to tally I get questions about Radiohead all the time, and over the years, if I were to tally the most common, it's basically like, what is the time signature for Pyramid Song, or like, what is the rhythm of Pyramid Song? It's one of the reasons I devoted an entire chapter to it.
I asked Zach that during our Amnesiac episode with just like tears streaming down my face because I'm like, somebody explain what is happening in this song to me.
So it's exactly the pi problem I explained earlier. You have these 5 kind of chord attacks: F sharp, G, A, and then the chords change a little bit after that, but you just have those 5 rhythms over and over again. And you can think of it a number of ways. The simplest way to think about it is short, short, long, short, short, right? But if we were to break down the number of subdivisions in there, it turns out that it's 3, 3, 4, 3, 3. And so, mod 16 means there's 16 underlying subdivisions there. 3 + 3 + 4 + 3 + 3. And it's a palindrome because actually you can play that rhythm forwards and backwards and it would be the same, right? 3, 3, 4, 3, 3 is a palindrome. Now, what's way cooler about that is that this is one of those days that I kind of blew my own mind when I discovered this, is that that's exactly the vertices to a pyramid, right? If you think about, you've got a small child, you've got all these blocks and they want to build a pyramid, what do? You grab a square, which is a 4-sided shape. So there's your 4. And then you're going to need 4 triangles to make the sides, right? And a triangle is, of course, a 3-sided shape. So now you have 16 total sides, 1 of 4 and 4 of 3. And that's the rhythm to Pyramid Song.
Well, and I love too in your book how you say after you break that down, and listeners, there is a visual depiction. And but I think you end that part by saying it's difficult to miss, and it's like, well, yeah, it's difficult to miss. Once this laid out. But no, it really is. I mean, that was the moment. That was a chapter that I really enjoyed going back to, because I was like, okay, it's okay if you don't understand it, just go back, and that's really what I would encourage a lot of folks to do. Is read it. Don't be frustrated by if some of it doesn't resonate the first time. Because having gone back to it, a lot more of it clicked. And, talking still about this song, I was really curious if, the visual mapping of the song, how it makes a pyramid, is this something that other folks in your field or, on the internet or whatever had hypothesized, or were you the originator of this concept to the level that you fleshed it out?
Yeah, God, the memory is a funny thing, isn't it? So in my memory, I was the person who came up with this. But, if you go back and tell me that there's some Reddit post from 2008 that says this, and then you show me my internet search history that I looked in that, I wouldn't argue with you. Let's just say that. But in my mind, I
when
think
that person comes on Idio Talk, then we can say they originated it. As of right now, we're canonizing it that you originated this.
I did find a YouTube video years after my book came out where someone had purported this whole theory. And I was like, that sounds oddly familiar. And then they actually lifted the graphics from my book and put it in their YouTube video without citation. And I was like, okay.
My God.
So we had a nice little friendly chat, and they...
Well, talking about citation, the episode hasn't come out yet, but, do cite you directly, because we do quote directly in the section of that song. And yeah, so I'm glad that was an okay part to jump in on as far as the Mod 16 palindrome, because I know there is a lot of buildup before that too, but this is a question Walker asked me, and I feel like I answered it correctly, but it does rhythmically make a pyramid just from Tom's part alone, right? What Phil and Johnny and I guess Colin are doing, that just adds to the sauce, right?
Right. I think of Tom's piano part as like the foundation of the song, and that especially the drum part is sort of like playing around it, almost like a great jazz drummer should do, right? They're not playing exactly the rhythm, they're playing around it and accenting it and adding to it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. That means I answered it right at the time. And that's amazing too, because, and I can't recall if you cover this in that chapter, but my kind of understanding is maybe that what Tom is playing rhythmically might not be the most unusual thing to play, especially for where he was at in his piano playing in his career then. It is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. And it's amazing. And it's crazy that the palindrome is there. Would you agree, or do you think it's one of the most unique pieces like that?
So that rhythm, the Euclidean distribution of 5 and 16 is super common across all genres of music. So it's not it's not a like sui generis rhythm. What's interesting about it is that it starts the song and there's no kind of like disco beat foundational layer to measure it against. And so for 2 minutes, really all we have is like short, long, short, long. We can't even really, short, long, short. We can't feel like really how many subdivisions are in there because it's the only thing present. That's what makes that song rhythmically weird. Actually, if you can do this as an experiment, if you just start the song after Phil Selway's drums come in, it's a lot clearer what's going on because now you have the foundation and you have his ride cymbal like subdividing everything for you if you just start it then.
And if I'm not mistaken, too, I think that was one of the songs very early on in both Kid A and Amnesiac recording that was the icebreaker for Tom's writer's block. And I know Phil recorded his parts, I believe, in March of the next year. It was a ways away. I know Johnny didn't record his strings until a full year later. So that is kind of speaks potentially to the brilliance, because that means it was just Tom doing that when they played and wrote the song. That's incredible. Okay. Well,
I have just a follow-up, Brad. Have any of your discoveries about this song, has the band or anyone in the camp like confirmed the intentionality of any of this? Have they talked about, if this was something they set out to do? This
is the second most common question I get after what's the rhythm with Pyramid Song. No, I mean, is anyone shocked that Radiohead hasn't gotten back to me over the years? No one's shocked about that. I know that Johnny Greenwood has a copy of my book, and I hand wrote a dedication. But I gave him my phone number, I gave him my fax number, I gave him everything, and I've heard nothing back. I mean, we could talk a lot more about intention if you want, but a lot of my thought about this is that intention is kind of a rabbit hole to go down for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, artists are notorious for kind of making up post hoc why they did something to sound smart. Or actually, in the case of Thom Yorke, I think actually to the opposite. Oh, it's just rock and roll. Stop scratching your beards about it. Right? No, you planned that, man.
Sure.
But also memory. As I've said before, it's really difficult for artists to remember what they were thinking at the time they wrote a song 20 years ago,
Yeah, and you talk about, too, that quote from Tom that he this is the thing I love about Radiohead, Bob Dylan, too, as well. Like, but in that quote, he talks about like, there was this exhibit, right, for Egyptian funeral rites, and then the Tom Waits influence and Angry Man of Jazz.
Mingus.
Yeah, and you listen to those songs, and it's like, okay, I guess I hear it, but then if you listen to them, maybe you go, if you listen to them all kind of in a row, then it really starts to blend together, I think. And it's not that it's lifted in any sense like that, but I think it's very humanizing, right? Because, we throw around the term genius so much, but there you have somebody saying where maybe the influence came from and kind of diminishing the brilliance of it a little bit. It's just enough. I don't know. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So getting into something that's a little more subjective, Brad, would you say that you have a favorite Radiohead album?
For the longest time, it was Hail to the Thief. And kind of for a lot of the reasons we've already covered, it kind of maximizes this experimental spirit that I was really into as someone who was writing experimental music and thinking a lot about it. It probably ties with King of Limbs for like sheer most experimental album they put out. But then I got older and like, I don't know, I have a toddler now, and it's just like not the sing along record, you know? And I know it's cliche, but I'm gonna go within Rainbows now, I think.
Okay.
I like that. But I also appreciate the arc of Hail to the Thief being the top one for you. I think every Radiohead fan seems to have a very like hyper specific relationship to that album. I feel like no two Radiohead fans feel exactly the same about Hail to the Thief.
It's divisive, to be sure, in a way that like in Rainbows everybody can agree on. I think it's the opposite of In Rainbows in that way.
Now your toddler's favorite Radiohead album, it's got to be Pablo Honey, right?
I'm unfortunately married to somebody who Radiohead's about their least favorite band, so we don't listen to a ton of Radiohead together as a family. He is starting to get more into some later Beatles stuff, so there is hope for him.
Cool.
Oh man, that's magic.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
I have a child as well. He's 9 now, and I play Radiohead a lot and pretend as if it's not a targeted indoctrination. You know,
play it cool. You know, don't make a big deal out of it. Yeah.
Now, I am just on this question of favorites. Did you ever find your way back to the Bends? That being the first one that, you know, didn't connect with you? How do you feel about it now?
So when I had the book basically done, it, you know, went back to the press, and some of the reviewers were like, dude, you just can't like not talk about those records. And I was like, fine. So in the intro, I do kind of go back to them. And this is like in the year 2014. I go back, I listen really closely to those records for a month or so. And I really gave it a second shot. There are some big rock songs in the Bends that I like now if I'm driving and the windows are down, like the Bends, like Planet Telex, like Black Star. But I can't tell you the last time I opened Pablo Honey.
Yeah. No, when
for
we
me,
went
it
through
was when we had to do an episode about it.
Yeah. Walker famously unwrapped his vinyl copy of Pablo Honey, and yeah, I mean it's one of those things that I think, knowing the whole story, it's really fun. You don't even get that necessarily with the Beatles. Of course, Meet the Beatles is more, they're imitating a lot of things, sometimes directly. And then, you know, starting at Rubber Soul, you get this just insane sophistication increase. Maybe before that, obviously this is subjective, but what's so interesting and fun about Radiohead is that, you know, Pablo Honey is outside of Creep, which is a song everybody knows. It's really not a fun record to listen to, but even from that to the Bends, just the amount of growth I think is really, really substantial.
Yeah.
And yeah. So did you have anything else you want to ask, Walker?
No.
So I talking about Johnny Greenwood and you know, just being mindful of time, I was curious if you have like a musician or a guitar player in mind that you think Johnny Greenwood has influenced in a way that where you like hear that person emulating his sound, a sound that is so difficult to replicate, right? Because I know people praise him as the wizard of the band, the true genius, because he maybe has more of the theory understanding. And it's okay if you don't have an answer, of course. I have one person in mind, but I was really curious to hear if you know, you've ever noticed that in a different band.
I mean, I could think of some bands or some artists that embody the same general spirit of experimentation that Johnny does. But in terms of like the sound of like his guitar or the sound of his composition, you know, no one living, Olivier Messiaen, the French composer who died in 1992, but I think that influence goes backwards. No, I think he's quite the genius, in fact.
Yeah, and so, you know, being somebody who studied music as in depth as you have, you know, obviously, maybe folks who don't even listen to classical music, but they know the names Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, etc. Do you think it's possible? We can only speculate, but you know, say 100 years from now, that folks will put, say, somebody like a McCartney and a Greenwood, or Tom York, but I would say a McCartney and a Greenwood will they talk about them in the same sense? I know there's so many variables that could say no, but what are your thoughts on that?
I actually think that they'll be talking about McCartney and York in the same breath.
Okay.
I think that Tom York is more of the McCartney-esque songwriter. He's just such a brilliant songwriter. And you mentioned, reading music and knowing theory, which of course Tom doesn't. I don't think that has really any bearing to do with how much of a sheer genius Tom York is. I think that people will be talking about Greenwood's film scores 100 years from now, but
yeah,
and Radiohead songwriting, but I don't think, because Johnny's only written 4 of the songs
from a Radiohead perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, I only know of The Tourist.
So
didn't he write Wolf at the Door?
He wrote Wolf at the Door. He wrote Idiotech.
Okay.
Anyway, I think
does that include lyrics on Idiotech?
No. And when I say, I guess I have a very composerly sense of what it means to write a song. Idiotech came out of some weird electroacoustic experiment that he was conducting. But most of Radiohead songs are really seemingly from the mind of Tom York. And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Paul has stated as well too that he doesn't, read and write, music in that sense, and I don't think it has any bearing on his endurance or his just sheer brilliance as a songwriter. I was just kind of maybe putting Greenwood up there just because of the folks that I was comparing him back against, going back to that classical era. But that's really cool, and yeah, and I mean, okay, well, talking about the brilliance and the members of Radiohead, and we want to be very tactful here, but one of the things that Walker and I talk about a lot is
too much.
We'll say is what does Ed do? And we know that he can, in live renditions of "I Might Be Wrong," which is probably my favorite Radiohead song to watch them play live. I know that he can do a dry percussive strum, which is impressive on its own. But I was curious if you could expound upon that a little bit for us.
And we also know that there is at least one live version of that song where even that seems to not be.
Yeah. We into 2012, he doesn't play a single note on his guitar. But jokes aside, I was hoping that you could help educate us and our audience as to Ed's role in the band.
Yeah, I often think of Ed, and I don't think I came up with this term. I think of Ed as the great texturalist. That he adds texture to all of Radiohead's songs, and specifically through his use of not only the particular way that he touches the guitar, but through the effects pedals he uses. The pedal board pictures that a lot of people have seen on the internet from Ed's pedal board, it's just massive, and not only a massive number of pedals he's using, but the relative obscurity of some of those pedals that people are like, oh my god, I've never even heard of that one. Right. That's, I think, really something that rounds out Radiohead's sound. And if you watch the From the Basement videos, I think you can really see how Ed contributes to that sound. And it's funny, you're right though. If you watch Ed play, it looks like he's not doing much, like a little pick rake here, and but then you're like, whoa, that little thing he did kind of made a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this pedal board now, and that is absolutely insane. And I also really appreciate that call out to the From the Basement sessions, because well documented on this podcast is when I first truly fell in love with the band was around the release of In Rainbows, and watching all that stuff did give me a new and sustained appreciation for what Ed brings, as much as we make a lot of hay out of giving him a hard time on this podcast.
And one thing that I'm guilty of is actually assuming that every great and complex guitar part is Johnny Greenwood. But watching the From the Basement tapes, a lot of those really difficult guitar parts, Tom's playing them while singing.
Yes. Body Snatchers.
And Weird Fishes.
And my favorite song off Kid A, Optimistic, that is a 3-guitar song. And the textures that Johnny is throwing in are, so cool and Greenwood-esque. But Ed is also busy too. But yeah, Tom with the guitar in those From a Basement sessions is just so it's just so brilliant to watch. It's incredible. And I will say too, what has kind of fueled the Ed questioning is during Go Slowly, a B-side from In Rainbow's Disc 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tom has the acoustic, and it's just he and Ed on guitar, because I want to say Johnny's playing the glockenspiel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moment where Ed is slightly going too slowly, and Tom does that thing musicians do to each other of when you make your eyes bigger to be like, and done. And it's like, he looks a tad frustrated. So that's all. But it was just so funny because I'm like, Ed is a better musician than I could ever dream to be. But seeing him get called out by the leader was a little bit.
Yeah,
I
don't think anyone would like, who should we call to be the rhythm guitarist in our band? Let's call Ed O'Brien. Like, that's not his job, so it's not surprising to me that he doesn't have a ton of practice at that.
Yeah. It's like the guy in the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones whose job was just to dance. He's perfect for the job that he has.
Right.
So you talked about Coheed and Cambria. I know we're getting close to our time here, but I was curious, and I meant to mention this when I was asking about influences Greenwood might have on other guitar players. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Omar Rodriguez Lopez of the Mars Volta.
Yeah.
I hear a ton of Johnny Greenwood, and in fact, in the way the most where I've ever been like, oh, the type of whole tone scales or what have you, just the very, very almost sometimes the instruments being at odds with one another, but not in a way where this is garbage. It's incredible. But I was curious, other bands maybe besides Radiohead. You mentioned Coheed.
Omar. Shout out to calling out Omar in that regard. He's great, and in some way he kind of is Johnny and Ed in one. Sometimes I feel like he can actually play technical circles around both of them in terms of like finger work. But yeah, the way that he also controls his effects is very Ed-like.
Yeah.
I've often compared Radiohead in their compositional intent to Bjork. The way that Bjork tends to, obviously sells millions of records still, but no one's like, oh yeah, this is like a boring Bjork song. Every song she does is really interesting, but also the way that she started her career with like kind of like writing bangers for MTV and then got more complex. Sigur Rós, another Icelandic act, particularly the way that they do a lot of experiments with timbre. You're never like, oh, I know exactly what instrument is playing right now. It's always like, what is making that beautiful sound? And then particularly with like the way that like rhythm works, this is a surprising comparison, but the Swedish math metal band Meshuggah has basically made an entire career out of tricking people into thinking they're not in 4/4 when they really are, by doing like, let's play the guitar in 13 while everything else is in 4. And then lastly, a band that not a lot of people are familiar with, but I have loved for now 15 years. And I'm going to say it slowly so no one thinks I'm talking about that terrible British band. The Danish art rock band Mew, who...
Nice.
And I'm not going to tell you who I wasn't talking about. The Danish art rock band Mew does a lot with form, terminal climactic form, even through composed forms, and lots of complex time signature stuff that if you're a Radiohead fan and you're not familiar with Mew, go check them out.
Is that MEU?
Yeah.
MEW?
MEW, meant to emulate the sound of a cat if you speak Danish.
That's there. You gave me a few homework assignments in there because I don't want to speak for Zach, but I think it's come up for both of us that we're a little unfamiliar with Bjork's catalog as well, and
it's vast, so it's okay.
Well, I just when I hear her mentioned, it's usually in the same breath as loving Radiohead, and where would you recommend? Just knowing that we're big Radiohead fans, where would you recommend a good starting point for her being?
I think it's the 2004 record. It's called Medulla. And that's a great one to start with. It kind of blends electronics, but also brass choir in interesting ways.
Okay.
Cool.
And then didn't she also have a very important album in 1997, same year as OK Computer? That was kind of neck and neck, or am I...
Yeah, is that Post in 1997?
Yeah. So, okay, awesome.
That's kind of still like, yeah, they're really running parallel there. That's like, OK Computer and Post are both like, they're on MTV, but maybe not primetime MTV, you know what I mean? Like,
sure. Well, just as we're wrapping up here, wanted to know, what is your primary instrument of focus, or maybe you don't have a primary one. Maybe you play them all. But
I do play them all. I consider myself a rock multi-instrumentalist and composer.
Okay.
I got my start really playing drum set, and still, if the university shut down, really the only thing that I could be like, okay, I am a professional this, and anyone can hire me. I could live my life as a professional drummer.
Okay.
But I'm a fine rhythm guitarist. Probably no one's going to hire me to be a lead guitarist to shred in a 2-minute solo, but
sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then now I know that you're in a band yourself, right? Or maybe more than one. Do you play the drums, and where can people find those bands?
So I'm in a band called Darkapelago, and it's archipelago with a D apostrophe in front of it.
That's a great name.
Thank you. Darkapelago. And it sounds like I'm in a 5-piece metal band, but the secret is it's actually all me doing all of the parts in the studio. So we don't play live.
Well, I listened to this band in preparation for this, and when I read on the back of your book, and I'm stunned.
Yeah, that's me doing all the parts.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
that's impressive. It sounds like kind of a Death Clock approach. Are you a fan of Metalocalypse and Brendan Smalls?
More than I usually admit. Yes.
Okay. He's a really impressive musician for being such a talented comedy guy,
Yeah.
Okay. So Darkapelago, we'll link that in the show notes as well. And then are you working on anything that you're comfortable talking about or can't talk about, any books that or anything that we could find you on, in the future, in the horizon? Anything that you're comfortable sharing?
So I've taken over the most widely adopted music appreciation textbook called American Popular Music that puts Radiohead and other stuff in a larger 150-year context.
Wow.
So that's out in its 6th edition and will keep coming out because people keep using it. And I am co-authoring with Christine Boone. This is not out yet, but I'm co-authoring with Christine Boone an undergraduate theory textbook that I'm currently teaching from the drafts of. That I spoke a little bit about this earlier, but really reconceives of music theory as something that applies to today's hit music and not just Beethoven and Mozart.
Awesome. Well, I know that we're coming up on time here. I do just want to say one thing to you and to our audience. In your book, you may have to help me out with the phrasing, but to paraphrase something about the type of reader that's going to read this book, Everything That's Right Place, Analyzing Radiohead. And I think you say something along the lines of maybe a baseline understanding of music theory. Is that right?
Yeah.
Something like that?
I mean, it's certainly a baseline understanding of music theory would help you read the book, but I do think that there are certain chapters which are more available to people who think they know nothing about music theory. For example, the chapter on instrumentation and timbre, the chapter on song form, whereas other chapters like the harmony and voice leading one, you really kind of have to read music to read that chapter.
Sure.
But I guess I want to say in the same breath, I find that people know more about music theory than they think they do.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to folks, not that forward is a barrier at all, but as somebody who has continued to try and deepen my understanding in that regard, I would say that your book has really, really, really helped.
Oh, thanks.
So absolutely, man. And just to folks listening, if you assume there's an interest in and a love for Radiohead, and it could be an intimidating thing, but I can't recommend the book enough. Can't thank you enough for writing it, because it really does make these higher level concepts approachable, even if I've had to read them several times. So I really, really appreciate it. And of course, appreciate you coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much for being here. And do you want to throw out any social media handles or anything so people can stay up to date on your projects?
Yeah, I'm not out there much, but on Twitter, it's easy to find me. I'm at Radiohead Book.
Okay.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all we had. But yeah, thanks again, Brad. And, I think we'll be releasing this sometime in November. But yeah, until then, just really, really appreciate you setting aside the time.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Brad.
Yeah.
And thank you, listeners. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Idiotalk is a Glenn Brothers production. Get in touch with us at idiotalk.podcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at idiotalk.podcast. And thanks for listening to